Hi guys, I hope you're well and welcome to episode 150 of the Layton Fitness Podcast. So within this specific episode we'll be discussing deadlift mistakes, but more specifically how to correct these mistakes. This is a tricky exercise. This is probably one of the most difficult exercises to get the technique right, just because there's lots of things going on with the deadlift. Obviously you're moving a very heavy weight. This is the exercise you're going to be able to move the most amount of weight on, more than the squat or the bench press or the overhead press, and because of that it can become the most difficult, and this is probably the exercise I see performed incorrectly more often than any others. So let's head straight into the deadlift mistakes, and then we can focus on the correct technique for each individual mistake. So firstly, bouncing the weight off the floor. This is the first mistake, and this is something I see far too often. So you don't want to be just bouncing the barbell off the floor. It's just going to put your back in a compromised position. It's not going to be safe. Additionally, you're not going to be able to brace yourself correctly for each repetition, which is something I'll talk about later within the podcast. You need to actually be braced by bracing your core correctly prior to pulling the bar off the floor. And if you're just allowing the weight to just bounce off the floor, there's no way you can be properly braced. So make sure that the bar actually rests on the floor for a good half second. This is so important. So instead of bouncing off the weight off the floor, make sure that the bar actually rests on the floor just for a short period of time, so only half a second, quarter of a second, before you then brace your core once again, which I'll discuss shortly, and then you pull the bar off the floor. So instead of bouncing the weight, make sure that weight actually sits on the floor, brace yourself again, and then pull the weight off the floor. The second mistake is having your hips far too low. I see a lot of people trying to squat the weight. Essentially they have their hips far too low, and this therefore means that the hips will then shoot up before the bar actually moves off the floor. This is a common mistake. You may have noticed that you do this. You start with your hips low, your hips shoot up, and then the bar actually moves off the floor. So one great way to correct this is to actually record your deadlift from a side angle. And what I want you to note is the position of the hips as the bar actually moves off the floor. So you'll notice that your hips start too low, the hips will then shoot up, and then the bar moves off the floor. I want you to take note exactly where the hip position is as the bar actually moves off the floor, and that's going to be your brand new starting position. It'll probably feel a little bit strange initially because it's going to feel higher than what you've previously done, but that's actually the correct position to start the hips, and that will help tremendously because you're just losing power by allowing the hips to shoot up before the bar moves off the floor. Third mistake is not bracing your core correctly. This will make such a big difference to the amount of weight you can lift. You'll be stronger. This will help prevent your back from curving within the deadlift. It will allow your back to be in a more neutral position, allow you to be more explosive, and it's just a safer way to perform the deadlift. So I want you to imagine someone's about to punch you in the stomach. What would you do? What would your natural response be? And the natural response is to push your stomach out and to squeeze your abdominals, and that's exactly what you want to be doing for the deadlift. You want to make sure before each repetition you're having a big deep breath, you're pushing your stomach out, you're squeezing your abs, and then you're going to hold that position until you complete a rep. Then you're going to breathe out the top, and then before you pull the weight off the floor again, you're going to have that big deep breath and then hold that breath while pushing your stomach out. If you're wearing a belt, a great thing to think about is trying to push your stomach up against the belt. When you're trying to imagine trying to break that belt during the deadlift, and that will make a tremendous difference to your deadlift. You can also apply that technique to your squat and the overhead press as well. The third mistake is trying to pull the bar off the floor rather than push your feet through the floor. So it sounds counterintuitive, but instead of thinking about trying to pull the bar off the floor, I want you to try and imagine you're doing the opposite. You're trying to push the floor away from you, and this will just allow you to be in a more braced position. It will keep your back in a more neutral position. You'll be stronger, more explosive. So you want to try and imagine not only trying to push the floor away from you, you want to imagine you're on a leg press. That feeling of actually pushing your legs up against something. That's really the feeling you want to be thinking about when you're performing the deadlift. That cue alone will make a tremendous difference. And the final mistake is having your feet far too wide. This is for the traditional deadlift. feet position needs to be in a position where you're going to do a jump. So if you were standing up now and you're about to jump to try and touch the ceiling, where would your feet position be? And naturally they're going to probably be just inside shoulder width apart, and that's a great foot position to have for the deadlift. So instead of having your feet wider, I see people having their feet wider than shoulder width apart, unless you're doing a sumo deadlift, you want to have it in a position where you're going to be able to do a jump, and that typically for most people is just inside shoulder width apart. So focus on eliminating these mistakes, focus on applying the correct form, and that will help your deadlift tremendously. If you're still yet to subscribe to the podcast, please do so you don't miss an episode. And if you're still yet to download my free book, How to Set Up a Nutrition Plan, if you go to James Layton, Layton fitness.co.uk, you'll see a tab at the top of the page called free book, and you can download that immediately. And that will teach you how to set protein, carbohydrate, fat and calorie targets suitable for your fat loss or muscle building goals. Thank you very much for listening.